I don't talk about Major League Baseball on this podcast very often, if at all. I don't think there's been one video on this channel that has been dedicated solely to Major League Baseball, but I thought it was important to mention it today. There are a couple of reasons that I don't talk about baseball. One reason is I don't watch it. I grew up loving baseball. I was a huge fan of the Chicago Cubs. Once they were taken off of WGN 10 or so years ago, my interest in baseball declined to the point where I can't remember the last time I watched a full inning of a baseball game. Now, the second reason I don't talk baseball on this podcast is I'm not alone in my stance on baseball. Major League Baseball is no longer a national topic of conversation in America. If you want proof of that point, in the past 3 months, how often has baseball been discussed on Sports Talk Radio or ESPN or Fox Sports? We talk about the NFL and the NBA every day. How often has baseball been mentioned? None. Matter of fact, there's a real threat that the baseball season in 2020 is not going to happen, and it's barely been a blip on the national radar until a couple of days ago. Just think about that for a second. If the NFL and the Players Union in the NFL were fighting and there was a real threat that the 2020 season was going to be canceled, there would be wall-to-wall coverage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week about it. It would obviously be talked about nonstop on sports networks, but it would even be covered on MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, CBS, ABC, you name it. Same with the NBA, though the NBA wouldn't receive near the coverage the NFL would. But with Major League Baseball, the threat of the cancellation of the 2020 season has barely been a whisper. This is a critical time for baseball in America, because if they don't play this season, then there is a real risk that baseball may never recover in this country. Now, I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm dead serious. It is a real risk. If baseball does not get players on the field, the sport is running the risk of never recovering. Now, you may be wondering, why is baseball not being played right now? Is it because of the coronavirus? No, that's not it. A coronavirus obviously was the reason that the regular season hasn't started, but it is not the reason that they aren't playing today. The reason that baseball's not being played, the reason the regular season hasn't been even scheduled to start, comes down to one thing: money. At a time when unemployment in this country is sky high, at a time when there are millions of people that are struggling to pay rent, struggling to put food on the table, at a time when the social tension in America is at an all-time high, Major League Baseball and the Players Union are arguing over money. Now is not the time for millionaire players and billionaire owners to be arguing over compensation. I'm not going to go into too much depth and dig into the details of the money argument, what's going on. I don't want to bore the shit out of you. The purpose of this video is to talk about the ramifications of the cancellation of the season, if that were to happen. But the details need to be known so you kind of get the picture of why this could be so bad for baseball. Basically, what's going on? There have been 3 offers made by MLB to the players. And the players feel like they're getting screwed, and the league's offers are disingenuous. In all 3 proposals, the league has been asking the players to take huge pay cuts. 30% in one proposal, 25% in the next one, 20% in the third one. The players, on the other hand, are asking for their full prorated salaries, and they are not backing down. To be honest with you, both sides have a point. The players want 100% of their money for a full day's work. For example, If a player's making $1 million a year and baseball is going to have a 72-game regular season, that player wants his full $13,888 per game. Now that sounds reasonable, right? It sounds reasonable if we're talking about normal times, but we're not. Owners in baseball, like all other sports, are losing a shitload of money right now. And they're going to continue to lose money even if baseball comes back because fans are not going to be allowed to attend games. So the owners are asking the players to share in some of those losses. And the players are refusing to back down. It's as simple as that. Now, labor agreements, or I should say labor disagreements, I guess, this is nothing new for Major League Baseball. Of the three big sports leagues in America, it seems that baseball seems to fight most between players and owners. Everyone remembers the strike back in 1994. Now, for those of you that weren't born yet or were very young when that happened, in August of 1994, in the middle of the regular season, baseball had a strike that stretched for nearly 8 months, canceled the World Series, stretched all the way into the 1995 regular season. That work stoppage damn near killed Major League Baseball. People were pissed off. It did not sit well with fans that millionaire players and billionaire owners put a halt to the game that they loved over money. And baseball almost didn't recover from it. You got to remember, that was during the prime years of Michael Jordan. The Bulls were going on their second three-peat. The NBA was on fire. If it weren't for the home run chase in 1998 between Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire, and rampant steroid use across Major League Baseball that saw players hitting these astronomical home runs, I don't know if baseball would have recovered from that strike. Even with the home run chase in 98, it still took another 6 years for baseball to get back where it was in 1994 when that work stoppage happened. Attendance was down over 20% in those years following the strike. It wasn't until 2004 when attendance got back to the levels they were at before the strike. That was 25 years ago. In a time where the country was in the middle of a tech boom, the economy was on fire. There was not a lot of racial tension going on. In the 90s, baseball was still a major mainstream sport in America. They don't have any of that working for them right now. The economy in the shitter. Major League Baseball arguing about money. We all know what's going on right now with the protest and everything else. The divide between communities and their police departments. The bigger thing, though, there's not another Mark McGwire. There's not another Sammy Sosa to dig baseball out of this hole that they're creating for themselves. There's not another steroid era on the horizon that's going to save Major League Baseball. I understand the players' stance on this issue. And from what I've been reading, there are a lot of people that actually support the players. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't make a shit. Because if the season is canceled, the players are going to take a brunt of the blame. They're going to look bad. The problem with baseball, and this is not a new problem either. This is a problem that has been building for the past 15 or so years. There are no stars in Major League Baseball. Ever since the players of the Derek Jeter era, ever since those guys retired, Derek Jeter, A-Rod, guys like that, ever since they retired, baseball has faced a serious problem in creating new star players. If you walked up to a random person on the street and asked them to name one player from the Houston Astros, they couldn't fucking do it. Ask them to name a player from the Houston Texans or the Houston Rockets. Most people would be able to throw out a J.J. Watt or a Deshaun Watson or a James Harden. There was a poll that I mentioned a while back on this podcast. I couldn't find it again for this video. I wish I could. But the gist of it was, the poll asked people if they knew who Tom Brady was, if they could identify LeBron James, Mike Trout. Something like 95% of the people polled could identify LeBron James. 90% Tom Brady. Mike Trout. Supposedly, Major League Baseball's biggest star player, only something like 40 or 45% of people knew who the fuck he was. And that is the problem with Major League Baseball. Back in 1994, Major League Baseball was heavily relevant in the mainstream. These guys were in endorsement deals, commercials. You knew who Tom Glavine or Mark Grace or Greg Maddux, Randy Johnson. You knew who the star players were. It ain't like that anymore. Even though people were pissed about the strike in 94, and even though it took time for them to come back, eventually they did come back because there were players in the game that they cared about. You know, several years ago, the NFL went through a bit of a ratings decline, a revenue decline, when the whole Colin Kaepernick situation was going on with kneeling for the national anthem. But the NFL had a huge audience at that point. Still does have a huge audience. But they were averaging 18, 20 million people for a regular season game. That number dropped a little bit. But the NFL is so powerful that after a year or two, people came flocking back to it. I don't think that's going to be the case with Major League Baseball. If baseball cancels this season, I'm not sure that the smaller audience that they have is going to come back when they decide to come back. Game 1 of the World Series last year was one of the least watched World Series games in the history of Major League Baseball. It barely squeaked by Game 1 in 2014. Both games were watched by about 12 million people. But the World Series last year got progressively worse as it moved on. Games 4 and 5 were watched by 10 million and 11 million people. That is a low number for a World Series. Well, that's because it was the Washington Nationals against the Houston Astros. No, that was not the reason. 2018, it was Red Sox and Dodgers. Two huge media markets in Boston and Los Angeles. Two traditional powerhouse baseball teams that have followings throughout the country. That World Series in 2018 ranks 5th on the list of least watched World Series in the history of baseball. My point is, there is nothing on the horizon that can save Major League Baseball if they wipe out the 2020 season. What star can save the game? What team with a humongous national following is going to save the game? The last 10 years, baseball has become more and more of a regional sport. Big in Chicago, big in Boston, big in New York, St. Louis. But people in New York aren't watching Cubs Cardinals. People in Chicago aren't watching the Yankees and the Blue Jays. There's not any crossover appeal. If you're a fan of the New York Yankees, you watch the Yankees and nothing else. Whereas if you're a fan of the New York Knicks, you're going to watch LeBron James whether he's playing the Knicks or not. Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, he's going back and forth right now. One day, he's 100% sure that we are going to see baseball this season. The next, he's doubting if there's going to be Major League Baseball this season. All I know is they are running out of time. We are already in mid-June. You're going to have 3 or 4 weeks for spring training or training camp, whatever you want to call it. So, if an agreement was reached today, you're looking at late July before the regular season can even begin. Playoffs and World Series possibly getting pushed into November, which is a death sentence. Now you're battling against the end of the college football season and the climax of the NFL regular season. At the end of the day, a shortened season in baseball would be better than no season at all. I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't care about baseball. But I don't want to see it cease to exist either. Now, that doesn't mean I'm saying that if they hold out and cancel this season that baseball is going to cease to exist in this country. I don't think that's the case. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if this Major League Baseball season is canceled, it is going to be extremely difficult for them to recover. And there's a possibility that they never will. All right, that's all for today. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for me. Click the notification bell to receive all notifications from the channel. Appreciate you guys that have already done so. Leave me a comment in the section below. What do you think about the state of Major League Baseball in America? If the season is canceled, will Major League Baseball ever recover? Let me know your thoughts. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. If you have any questions, you can email them to BTLKC84@gmail.com. I will see you guys next time.